With the rise in voice assistant platforms, smart speakers and wearables, have you considered your brand's presence in this space? If not, then this video is all about creating a verbal brand and how you can leverage that to build your brand on those platforms. Welcome to Weekly Brand Tips, brought to you by Elements Brand Management. Weekly videos designed to help you unlock your brand's potential so you can stand out from the competition and create impact. Please remember to subscribe using the button below this video, and if you hit the bell notification, you'll be notified every time a new video drops. In a recent episode of our Unified Brand podcast, I'll put a link in the description, we were lucky enough to speak to Chip Edwards, who is the founder of Create My Voice and a verbal branding expert. And here's what he had to say about creating a verbal brand.
Traditionally, as a brand, we've kind of focused a lot on our website or some of our marketing material that we put out there. And a lot of that has been really visually based. But as we start looking at voice assistants where people are asking for things, once you strip away your logos and your colors and your fonts and your sliding images and all that kind of fancy stuff, as far as here's what our brand, how we represent our brand, once you take all that stuff away and you just have a response, an audio response, all of a sudden you have to kind of think about your branding a little bit differently. I know that you talk about branding from a really holistic, kind of wide perspective, and you really have to do that. And then once you start focusing on voice assistant or voice technology branding, all of a sudden you've got to say, okay, what is my content? The content of what I'm delivering, and how do I deliver that content in a way that from a verbal response represents my brand well? So that's kind of some of the shifts that are happening when you start thinking about branding in a voice assistant world. It really is your content and your interaction models and your presence, because a lot of people don't know that to get on these voice assistants, it's not magic. You actually have to do something to be able to get your brand out on these voice assistants.
Now, what a lot of companies are doing are rushing to this particular sort of channel, this medium, this space, but they're not actually thinking about how they can use these platforms to extend their brand. They're just sort of rushing to them and trying to get on there as quickly as possible because they feel it's a channel they should be doing. And as Chip mentioned, it's crucial to understand your brand first, from a holistic approach, understand who you are, understand why you exist, understand where you're going before you venture into these platforms, so that when you do get onto these platforms, it's more of an extension of your brand and you're creating the experience that is right for your audience but also matches what your brand stands for. So why does building a verbal brand matter? Devices like Alexa, Google smart speakers, voice assistants and wearables, and even voice assistants like Siri and Cortana are becoming so much more commonplace now that it's in our everyday life. So building a verbal brand is something that we're all going to have to do at some point. It's early days yet, but everything is extending into those places. You know, with things like smart devices and the Internet of Things only becoming more prevalent in the coming years, we're going to need to be able to build our brands on these platforms, or at least extend to these platforms in a way that is meaningful and sort of plays into what our brand stands for. It's a massive opportunity for brands to venture into this new space. And it also means that you're closer than ever before with your customers or your audience, because you are able to be with them on a dog walk or in the car or when they're in the kitchen cooking. You have the ability to be there as part of their life, in their everyday life, in a way that sort of 10 years ago you would never have thought would be possible for a brand to be. So it's really important to be ethical with this. It's really important to be in keeping with your brand and use it as a device to build your brand, but also help your audience. Use it as a way to help them with sort of connecting with your brand, but also building relationships and trust with your audience. Comment below with the voice assistant or the wearable that you have and what brands you interact with on those platforms. Things to think about before getting started creating a verbal brand. Make sure you're clear on your brand and you understand your brand. So if you're unsure on what your brand is, what it stands for, what your purpose is, what your mission is, what your vision is, what your personality is, your brand personality, it's going to be very difficult for you to venture into this space and actually do anything that is relatively connected to your brand, but also connects with your audience and resonates with your audience. And this is because this medium gives you nowhere to hide. So a lot of brands can hide behind great visuals, and it's important to have a really eye-catching, impactful design. But this medium doesn't give you that luxury of having the ability to have a message backed up with a visual or some eye-catching graphics that can really get across what you're trying to get across. So therefore, there's nowhere to hide in this medium. So your brand personality, your tone of voice has to come through crystal clear, and it has to be defined, and it has to be able to differentiate you from the competition. Now, if you don't understand your brand in the first place, or you're not too sure on why you exist or what your brand is all about, it's going to be very hard for you to craft something that is differentiated and that actually speaks to that audience. So you need to understand your brand beyond the visuals. So we just touched on this, but it's really important to understand what your brand stands for, what it's all about. And that isn't just the sort of the veneer of your brand's visual identity. So a lot of agencies, what they do is they'll respray the car. So they'll rebrand the business or the brand just with the visual identity. They'll just respray the car, but they won't ever check under the hood. Now, in order for you to effectively build a brand that is structured, has longevity to it, and is something that really can connect with your audience and differentiates, you need to look under the hood. You need to be able to understand what makes it tick, and you need to understand the brand before the visual identity, so outside of what it looks like. And that's going to be really important for this particular medium, because you don't have the luxury of any visual identity. It's all based on personality, tone of voice, and the content that you're developing and you're putting out. This is also where building a sonic brand will come in very useful. And if you're unsure on what sonic branding is, or you want to build your sonic brand, we have a video on that here. You need to use your brand's personality. So without visuals to help you set the mood or get a feeling coming across or get that emotion coming out, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to leverage your brand's personality more than you probably would do in other mediums in order to get that across. So this is where archetypal branding can come in quite useful, and we'll cover that in a future video. But essentially, what you want to try and do is work out what your brand's tone of voice is. What type of character is your brand? Is your brand about inputting wisdom? Is it about lifting them up or inspiring them? Is it about adding a hand of support or offering some kind of support? Is it about playfulness, fun, energy? Or is it about transformation? All these different ideas can come into how you build out your brand's personality and how you turn up on these platforms to really engage and keep your audience interested and subscribed to what you're doing. A great example of this is the CBeebies app. So I've got 2 children and they love CBeebies, and one of the things we do on a Friday night is we put on the CBeebies app on our Alexa, and what it does is it takes them through a little journey, allows them to ask questions, but it's all done in the tone of voice of the actual TV channel. So they've done a really good job. They use the same presenters, so you hear the voices of the presenters. And what it allows you to do is they can connect with their favorite shows on there. They can hear the songs of their favorite shows. They can get bedtime stories read to them through the app by the presenters. And it really does a good job of keeping the tone of voice of the CBeebies channel and keeping the personality, and it comes through really well in that particular app. Start now and future-proof your brand in this space. So if you listen to the episode and you listen to the podcast, I'll put a link in the description below. Chip mentions that you need to have an invocation name in order to start your app or your skill. So what that is it's similar to a web address for these platforms. So if you imagine like your website is at www.yourbrandname.com, then your sort of Alexa skill or your Google app or whatever it is will be at a particular invocation name. So you have something that is said in order to activate that particular brand on those platforms. Now, similarly to the beginnings of the web, so if back in the early days of the web, you would have people that would buy up hundreds of domain names in order to just sit on them and just keep them there. So you want to kind of, if you can, get your brand invocation name registered, but unlike the early days of the web, and still now with the web, you can buy a domain name, but you don't have to do anything with it. You can just sit on that domain name. With these particular platforms, you need to have the invocation name, but you also need to have some form of app on there or skill on there created. Now, this can be a really basic app, so it can be literally just a request for more information, as Chip puts it in the podcast. It can be something that is just one blog post maybe that is informative, or it could be a podcast, a link to a podcast, but you need something that people can use, or the actual platforms can use and give you back. Otherwise you can't get that invocation name. So there's a few hurdles to jump through, but it's important to do this, and it's worth doing this now, because what you don't want to happen is for, say, your competition to get your brand's name and use that for an invocation name. For obvious reasons, you don't want them to steal any sort of customers or your audience. They probably wouldn't do that, but you never know. So it's worth getting that handled, getting that registered, and getting some sort of skill set up. You can always extend this in the future, but if you do that now, you know that you're future-proofing your brand in this space going forwards. So it's really worth speaking to somebody like Chip Edwards at Create My Voice. I'll put the link in the description below for his website and how you can get hold of him. But it's worth speaking to somebody like that if you are looking to do this, because there are some things that you have to do and have to get right in order to get your particular app or skill up on these particular platforms and to get an invocation name. So it's worth getting in touch with Chip, and he can help you out setting that up. Before you build your brand on smart speakers or voice assistant platforms, you really need to have a good handle on your brand, as we spoke about earlier on. In order to do this, we've put together a worksheet that is a PDF download that you can use. It's how to define your brand. It's completely free. I'll put a link in the description below. Just click on that, put your details in, and you'll get a workbook that you can work through to define your brand. If you've enjoyed this episode and you'd like to see more, videos come out weekly, and they're designed to help you unlock your brand's potential so you can stand out from the competition and create impact. Please subscribe below and hit the bell notification so you'll be notified every time a new video drops. Have a great week, catch up soon, and keep those brands unified.